Inlingua podcast live from Dessau is broadcast from Middle Deutschland and features all things languages. The show is hosted by our teachers, presenting students and guests from all walks of language learning experiences. For our next episode of Inlingua podcast live from Dessau, we welcome Joe. Joe is a colleague who works for Inlingua Munich, one of the largest language schools in the Inlingua network. We hope you enjoy the episode. So I know a little bit about you because you sent just a short biography.
Yeah.
So when I read that biography, my first inclination of thinking was, okay, why on earth would this guy major in German studies at a university? But then I started thinking, let's go to this particular point in time. And now I'm thinking, how fortunate for him that he did. Does that kind of make sense?
I think it totally makes sense. Yes, no, that makes sense. And to be honest with you, I kind of came to the German studies major in a very roundabout way. I started at the University of Arizona actually majoring in engineering.
Okay.
I did aerospace engineering, and I did that for about 3 years until I came to the conclusion, just the realization actually that I was terrible at the mathematics involved. Definitely do not have a mathematical mind. That's not a strength of mine. Okay. And, obviously in engineering, there's a lot of that required. Up to a certain point, I was doing okay. But then after a while, I realized this was not going to be a major for me. Mm-hmm. And the reason the German studies thing came about was because when that kind of fell through, what I had wanted to do was major in business administration and the minor in a foreign language. Okay. And I kind of settled on German because Tucson, Arizona is pretty close to the Mexican border. Tucson's only about, I don't know the numbers, but we're talking about a 45-minute to 60-minute drive to Mexico. So There's a lot of Spanish, in my area growing up. My parents and grandparents, they all spoke Spanish fluently. So it didn't seem exotic to me. It was something that was just kind of around day to day. Didn't feel like I wanted to do that. Okay. But I did want to take a language that I felt was just kind of useful in the economy, something that was going to be a good business language. Mm-hmm. And I took German, and the reason that kind of flipped and it went from being a minor to a major, it's largely due to the first German teacher that I ever had. Her name was Kerstin Meyer. She walked into my German 101 class and just kind of frankly blew my socks off. She was a really great teacher, made the subject matter seem really interesting, and I don't know. It just went from there. And I decided, okay, this will be my major, and then I'll minor in business studies. But that's actually how that came to be. Okay. Yeah. So like you said, though, I am fortunate this many years on down the line. I consider myself fortunate that things took that turn, because obviously it's opened up this life for me. It's enabled me to come here and do what I'm doing now. So.
Okay. So was your study abroad experience part of the undergraduate experience or no?
Yes, it was. I applied for a scholarship at the University of Arizona. There's an Oscar Grunow scholarship, and X number of undergraduates in the German studies program get to apply for it. And I was lucky enough to win that scholarship. And what that scholarship did was it paid for me to do 2 semesters here at Munich, the University of Munich, Ludwig Maximilians.
What was your level of proficiency when you left Arizona to go to Munich? Was it according to the European standard? What would be your score?
Wow, if I had to guess at that point, I would either see a really solid B1 mm-hmm. or perhaps sneaking into the B2 level. I was always I did okay in my German classes. Obviously, I don't think I would have won the scholarship if that wasn't the case, but mm-hmm. I did all right. I was able to understand German. It just made sense to me from hearing somebody speak it. It was never a problem for me to understand it. And speaking, I definitely don't want to say it came easy to me. I don't want to give that impression at all, but I was able to make myself understood. We'll say that. So I had a pretty solid level when I came here.
So what kind of classes are you taking when you arrive at Munich?
Well, that God, to be totally frank with you, that was such a long time ago that I don't actually remember the coursework that I did. But what the university told me, what my home university in Arizona told me, was they said, okay, listen, you go, you take a look at the course offering in Munich, take the courses that you're interested in, and essentially what we'll do is we'll try and find that equivalent course at your home university here in Arizona. So the entire palette was wide open to me. I was able to go and take any course that I wanted to, any course that I was interested in. So I think that's what I did. I just said, okay, this looks interesting. This caught my attention. Let's do it. And then when I got back home, I met with an advisor, and they said, okay, that's kind of the equivalent of this course, and they gave me credit where they could. There were a couple of that apparently didn't fit for the university, and I didn't get credit for those, but for the most part, that's what they did. Yeah.
So were all of the courses that you took, were they in German?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. Okay. And that was a little bit overwhelming. Like I said, my German was pretty good, but then when you get thrown into the deep end of the pool like that, it's a bit of a rude awakening. So it took a little while to get adjusted, but yeah, all my classes were in German.
So how is that coming from Tucson?
Tucson, yes.
To Munich. I mean, like, were you living in a student dormitory? I mean, obviously you're in like one of the major cities of the world.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
you had not been to Germany, but prior to that, right?
I hadn't really left the United States. I mean, I'd been to Mexico. As I mentioned, Mexico's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from us in Tucson. So I'd been down to Nogales, I'd been down to Rocky Point, and I think I'd even at that point been down to Tijuana. But outside of that, I don't really, because it's so close, because it's so present, I didn't really consider that to be foreign travel. I hadn't really left the United States. I hadn't left the United States except for those trips to Mexico. So that was my first foreign experience. They put me into a student dorm. If anybody's familiar with Munich, there's the Studentenstadt up in the north part of the city. And that's where they put me. I had a little dorm room there. It was my own dorm room, thankfully. I mean, I kind of like that. I didn't have to share it with anybody. Yeah, but that's what it was. They put me in a student dorm. So that was my introduction to living in Munich.
And are you taking public transport every day to the campus?
Yeah. The scholarship, it provided a stipendium as well. So the scholarship was for me to come do the 2 semesters at the university. And then it gave me basically the pocket money to pay for the rent on the dorm room, and also, a little bit of living money. So with that came the option to buy a ticket on the public transport. So that's what I was doing.
So are you still friends with some of your students that you met on that trip, or on that experience, I should say?
Well, friends, how can I? You kind of lose touch. Let's be fair. This was a while ago. Actually, we're coming up on 20 years now. My study abroad started in 2001, September of 2001. Funny story. It was actually less than a week after the September 11th attacks. That was September 17th, I think, of 2001.
Okay, so you left right after that.
Yeah, I was actually that is still probably, as far as I can remember, the most crowded airplane experience I can ever remember, because a lot of travelers were stranded, obviously, after the attacks, and they were just jamming people into every nook and cranny in the planes when they were going overseas. In fact, I thought my flight would be canceled, but thankfully it wasn't, because I had booked that previous, but they didn't cancel my booking. But it was pretty jam-packed. So like I said, but the point of saying that was that this was a while ago. This is 20 years ago. So you kind of lose touch. I would definitely say that I'm friendly with those people. We may, they're friends on Facebook, but do I see them or interact with them? Sadly, no, not really.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah. So what about living? Okay, so at that time, how old are you when you're in Munich? Are you 21 or 21?
Yeah, something in that range. Yeah, about 21, I believe, because like I said, I'd in the US, I was young, actually. I started college when I was 17 years old. I always started school early because I have an August birthday. But as I mentioned, I started off in a different degree program, and I did that for 3 years. So then you can imagine there's not a lot of engineering credits that transfer over to the German studies department. So I was basically starting over from zero. But by the time I came over, I think I would have been actually right about 21.
Okay. So what was that? I mean, obviously, like, first time abroad, first time living alone, not living alone, but first time international experience, right? Living alone. Aside from like the educational part of it, how meaningful was this experience? Like what impact, what long-lasting impact did you learn from this?
Well, it was, well, to be totally fair, it actually was my first time living alone because the University of Arizona is in Tucson and I was born in Tucson. So rather than, paying the money for room and board at the university, I just stayed and lived at home.
Perfect.
So it actually was my first time living alone, and that was great. That was a pretty meaningful experience for me. I kind of, how can I say this? I consider myself to be a pretty independent person. I like to be alone. I like to figure things out on my own.
Mhm.
So doing that in that type of environment where you're, that's about as alone as you can get. So not only is it living on your own for the first time, but it's living on your own for the first time and you're in another country. Mom,
Right.
it's not a phone call away. There's nobody to do, whatever, to cook you a meal or to do your laundry or anything like that. And it was really great. It was really liberating.
Yeah, I mean, you're having to negotiate, and you're having to negotiate in a different language and navigate in a unfamiliar surroundings, right? So like,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, confidence building,
For sure.
It's motivational. I think the fact that you can like not only survive, but you can like succeed, right, in a foreign country. I think that gives a lot of confidence to like your.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Because again, like I said, there's not much of a safety net. And don't get me wrong, I don't think, if something had gone wrong that I just would have been, alone in an emergency situation. But for the most part, in your day-to-day life, there is no safety net. And when you do that, you realize that you can do that. It is really confidence building, to be totally honest with you. It was great. Like I said, it's very liberating.
Okay. Did you like the food when you came over?
I love the food. I don't know. How can I say this without offending anybody? I'm a carnivore. I love meat, and basically German cuisine is not particularly fancy. It's a very meat and potatoes based type of cuisine. And I like the basics, It was great. I was happy with the food from the start.
Nice. That's really nice. Were you able to do a little traveling around Germany during that first experience? Like as a student on the weekends, were you able to meet friends and get out and kind of see around Munich?
Yeah, that was great. So Munich, of course, when you're in a new city, you take the opportunity to explore whatever's in your city, whatever's there to see. So I did a lot of that within Munich. But the other really neat thing was now this is one thing that's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know exactly how this worked out, but that scholarship from the University of Arizona kind of placed me in league with another group that was based here in Germany, something like the German American Men's Club or the German American Friendship Club or something like this. And then the way that was organized was basically there were other students from other universities. I think the University of Arizona sent 2 students, me and another fellow. And other universities sent other students as part of this same, I don't know what it is, same organization or whatever. And then they had the German students that would be traveling to do their year abroad in the United States the following year. And what they did was they arranged 5 separate meetings in different cities in Germany throughout the course of those 2 semesters, where we were able to travel and just kind of connect with everybody else that was in that same program.
Okay,
so yeah,
cool.
we went to Dusseldorf, we went to Dresden, we went to Berlin, and there's a couple of others that I'm forgetting. I think Karlsruhe was one of them, or Tübingen maybe. But yeah, I got to travel through the program that was paid for by them. That was wonderful. Excellent. And then in between semesters, I took the chance to travel around Europe as far as I was able. Got myself one of those Eurorail or Europass.
Eurorail tickets. Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. And I did that. I went to Paris, London, Prague, and a couple of other places. So yeah, I really did. I really tried to take advantage of the opportunity to travel.
Dude, it sounds like you took advantage of almost every opportunity as a student. That's excellent.
Definitely wanted to. Yeah, I wanted to make the best of it. At that time, I never knew that I was going to come back, or if I was going to come back, when I was going to come back, what that was going to be. So
okay, so that's another good question. Like, okay, your 2 semesters are over, your departure date is coming up. Do you want to stay? Are you sad? I mean, you have to go home and graduate, I know, but do you have a sense right there that there's a possibility one day I may come back here?
I definitely felt that there was a possibility that I was going to come back. I wasn't sad, I was excited. I didn't get to visit home that year, so I was gone for the entire year. So I was really looking forward to coming back, seeing my friends and family and whatnot. So I wouldn't say that I was exactly sad. I was sad that the adventure was ending, but happy to be going back home. But I did kind of feel it's okay. I can do this. Something that was interesting to me. Definitely, there's a possibility that I'll be going back at some point.
Okay, so I mean, again, this is 20 years ago, but like, okay, 1 year abroad, all these new ideas, all this new way of life, go back home to the States. How long before that wears off?
Well, the one thing that I'll say about that, the funny thing was I never felt that I experienced any sort of culture shock coming to Germany. It's both, I guess, Western societies both come from at least somewhat of a similar tradition. The culture shock to me was actually going back home to the US. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way, but there are just certain things, you get used to the way things are done in Germany, and all the things that you experienced in the United States, just you took for granted because that's where you came from. That's the environment you grew up in. And then when I came back, I was like, okay, wow, there are some differences, there's a lot of differences. But again, like I said, I'm not saying that with any sort of judgment, that one was better than the other, I think, but just saying, okay, I'm a little bit more attuned to these differences now. Sorry.
Can you tell us like one or two of those differences, if you remember?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I remember, and this is probably small potatoes thing in the grand scheme of things, but the one thing that I noticed going back to the United States is how absolutely ubiquitous the American flag is. And again, I'm not saying this with judgment. I have no problem with that. I don't find that negative per se, but coming from Germany where, people are a little bit more shy, about, just grabbing a German flag and waving it around. It's definitely not the case in the States. Now it's just like, okay, there's an American flag on a car dealership. There's an American flag in front of convenience store. It's just kind of everywhere. And it's just like, okay, we definitely have different attitudes on how we express, love of country or whatever. That was one of the things that I noticed right away. Yeah. The patriotism, nationalism, I don't know how you want to call it, but that definitely was one of the things that stood out.
Yeah. I'm giving you leading questions based on my own experience. So that's why I'm asking, like, how long before you got home, before like people were less interested in hearing your stories and they sort of gravitated towards like, okay, we're back in our safe environment and let's continue our way of thought processes. You know what I mean?
For me, that happened. That happened pretty quickly. Exactly. Like an object of like, fascination. When I first came back, people were like, okay, wow, how was that? What was the experience like? Blah, blah, blah. And then, I think about it like this, anytime you go on vacation, this is probably a silly a comparison, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. You go on vacation, your first day back in the office, everybody's asking, how was your vacation? And people do that. You get tired of answering the question. You have to answer it about 100 times. And then people feel like they've done their duty. They asked you about that. And then right away, it's back to the normal routine. Yeah. And I kind of found that was the same returning from my study abroad year. Yeah. Maybe the questions were a little bit more, I don't know, I guess a little bit more in depth, because that is something of a different experience. You spent a year abroad in another country, but then, once that fascination wears off, you're just Joe again. You're just with your friends, and everything goes back to normal. Yeah.
Okay, so you go back home. You graduate within a year. I'm assuming, like you got your.
Yeah, basically about a year. I think I graduated with my bachelor's in 2003. I returned in 2002. So yeah, a year.
Okay, so what happens? Okay, you get your diploma, you got your German studies diploma, and what happens next?
Well, nothing dramatic, nothing dramatic at all. I was working, actually before and after my trip to Germany, I worked for a fundraising consulting company part-time. Mm-hmm. And once I got my degree, I just kind of stepped into a full-time role at the company. So I was doing what I was already doing, just doing it full-time. And I took the job with them and stayed there until my return to Germany.
Okay. So, but that job, did it have anything to do with Germany or German language?
Nothing whatsoever. Okay. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. So then the World Cup brings you back.
World Cup brings me back. So I mentioned like I loved working for that company, but it was a small company, as I mentioned, and I had kind of realized that wasn't really there was nowhere else for me to go. At the point that I was there, I had, there was somebody that was in the publications department who was a manager, and there was somebody in the other departments that were manager. But the only person that really, really, really was superior to me, or the only people that were superior to me, were the guys that owned the company. And I knew I wasn't ever going to get their job. So I said, okay, this would be a good time to just kind of branch out, see what else is out there. And the World Cup provided, that was in 2006. The World Cup, to me, kind of provided that opportunity. I said, okay, I'll leave my job here and spend basically a month in Germany watching soccer, and we'll see what happens from there. So that's how that came about.
So as an undergraduate, okay, just for our listeners who might be interested, what are the choices coming out with German studies? Either you're going to go into teaching, right? Or doing something with German in another related field. I don't know what that would be. I'm limited in.
Well, to be honest with you, I think my planning in that regard was quite poor. I didn't have much of a plan. To be honest, I think what I wanted to do was, and that's why I said things kind of got flipped when I left the engineering school. I had originally wanted to do business as a major and then do foreign languages as a minor. So what I kind of thought once I got the degree and once I left the company that I had been working for was, okay, maybe what I'll do is I'll get the chance to work in a company, work in business, something within some sort of international field. I was going to say, the one thing is, you were mentioning, I think it's a place that a lot of people think to go after they get a degree like that, is to go into teaching. To be honest, I had not considered that either. It's just kind of the way things worked out that it ended up that way.
Okay. So World Cup brings you back to Germany because you're a football fan.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think it's becoming more and more common nowadays, but I was always a soccer fan. Really enjoyed the sport and was really, really getting into it. I'd gotten my first, when you follow the national team and you go see them in person for the first time, it's like, like you're stepping onto the field, you call it your first cap. Yeah. I had that, God, I don't remember when that was, but it was a qualifier in Salt Lake City.
When you were here for a year, did you go to the Bayern games?
I did, in fact. I still remember that. The very first game that I went to for FC Bayern Munich, they were playing at Olympiastadion and they played against Hansa Rostock. I still remember that.
Fantastic. Okay. So you come back.
That tells you how long ago it was, because there was still an East German team in the Bundesliga back then.
Really?
Yeah, well, I guess Leipzig is back now. But yeah, Rostock.
Was Germany hosting the World Cup in 2006?
Germany was hosting the World Cup. US had qualified. We had games. The United States had games in Nuremberg, Kaiserslautern, and Gelsenkirchen.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough. Part of the reason I came back to the World Cup, it wasn't just to kind of be here and soak up the atmosphere. I actually had tickets with a buddy of mine, and my brother ended up coming as well. We had tickets to the US games, all the group stage games. So we came.
So how many games is that?
Three round robin, 3 round robin games. We actually had the option, if the US advanced into the knockout rounds, for the next 2 games as well. But the United States kind of laid an egg that year. So
do you stay? I'm looking at the questions that I sent to you. Do you stay then, or do you go back home after the World Cup?
Well, the plan was to go to the United States games and look for something. Just try my luck. So for the rest of the tournament, after the US got knocked out, I was just watching all the games on television, just like everybody else, but sending out applications here and there, different companies, to see if I could land anything. And yeah, I had a return flight booked, and I want to say it was something like a month or maybe a month and a half after I had first arrived. And I was, like I said, just going to test the waters, see what would happen. And if I came up with anything, consider staying. And if I didn't, just go back home as planned. And I got lucky. I got hired by inlingua.
Okay.
A bit of serendipity involved in that, actually. I don't know how interested anybody would be in hearing this, but actually my interview with inlingua with Dr. Martin Ecker at the time was the director of studies at inlingua Munich. Was actually on the day of my return flight, and I had a big choice to make. I said, okay, do I get on that plane and just kind of forget about this, or do I take the chance of going to the interview and not getting hired? Now I'm kind of stuck, but I decided ultimately to go to the interview and got the job, so I stayed.
Did your brother stay back too with you, just to make sure?
No. Him and my buddy Brian, they both went home.
They flew back.
Yeah.
You stayed there. All right, so you had the interview, you got the job, and what happens? Do you start looking for an apartment? Or do you go back home anyway and come back? What happens?
No. I stayed. At that point, I had myself a German girlfriend. So that's where I was staying at the point. We had met. That's a completely different story. We had met, I think, in 2004. She was on vacation in Las Vegas, and I was on vacation in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Never guess, but we met at the Hofbräu House in Las Vegas. So we stayed in contact. So that when I went to Germany, I had an automatic place to stay.
Yeah.
And basically, I didn't want to impose upon her. She was living at the time with her sister in an apartment, and I didn't want to impose upon them. So I considered, maybe getting a place on my own. But the sister in the end ended up moving out. I think she moved in with her friend, or she went somewhere else. And so basically it kind of worked out because I was able to take up half the rent. So I basically had a place to stay right from the beginning.
Okay. So were you teaching English or were you teaching German or both?
No, teaching English.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that experience? Like, obviously you have a talent with languages, but you hadn't had any pedagogical courses, right?
None at all. No.
So how was, walk us through do you remember the first class you had?
I do. It's funny that you mentioned that. I hadn't thought about this in so long, but the very first class that I got from inlingua after doing my method training was a class with, I think there were something like 5 or 6 kids. And when I say kids, I mean kids. We're talking about less than 10 years old. And I said to myself, if I could teach this class, this is the very first time I'm stepping into a classroom, kids that don't speak the language and they're, probably got short attention spans. If I survive this class, I've got this in the bag. I could do anything else they throw at me. I felt so. So yeah, that's how that started. That was my first class.
So, okay, so you work for a year, right? And inlingua, you're gaining more experience teaching, you're becoming more comfortable in the classroom with 10-year-olds. It's a good start, because that'll really.
Well, the funny thing is, like I said, thankfully, that was one of the only times that I can recall that I ever had to teach kids that young. Absolutely. But as the World Cup had just ended, and these were kids, I kind of leaned pretty heavily on soccer to kind of to bring things, to make things interesting for them.
Nice.
So that's what I did. I'm not much of a singer, so I don't think anybody wants to hear that. But like I said, I brought sports into it, and that's how I kind of tried to keep their attention. Okay.
So then why did you? Yeah. So why did you go back home then after the year?
Well, I went back home. That was kind of a family decision. I had my grandmother wasn't doing too well up until that point. So her health started to kind of decline while I was in Germany. And I definitely wanted to go back and kind of spend some time with her while she still had while she still had that time left. So I did. I went back home, made the decision to do that. And ended up being temporary again. Okay.
And then you came back.
Then I came back.
And you've been back ever since, right?
Yes. So I went, let's do this. Let's do the timeline. So in 2007, I returned to the United States. And then it was in January of 2010, we say summer of 2007 until about January of 2010, I was in the States. And then I came back again in 2010. And once again, frankly, just a bit of serendipity. Again, just got very lucky. And Martin Ecker was still the director of studies at that point. And at some point, I think I had come back in September of 2009. And I said, okay, you know what? I want to go back. I want to spend a little bit more time in Germany. My time there is not quite done. And I sent a message upon returning from the Oktoberfest to Martin Ecker. And I said, hey, are you guys still looking for English teachers? Do you have any need for English teachers? And he actually sent me a message back that says, no, not at the moment. We're not looking for anybody. We don't have any need to fill. But you know what, at the beginning of the year, things might change as things start to pick up again. So, let's touch base again there. And I don't know why, but I kind of maybe stupidly decided that was enough. That was enough for me to kind of pack my bags and come back to Germany. And I'm not kidding you when I say that this was just serendipity again. The day that I landed back in Germany, I had a message from Martin Ecker basically saying, hey, we're looking for an English teacher again. Were you still thinking about coming back to Munich? And I said, hey, I'm here now. I just arrived.
Perfect. Perfect.
And I just kind of picked right back up where I left off.
Okay. And then, so that's in 2010? 2010. Okay, so today is 2021. So you've been working for the last 11 years at inlingua.
Yep, absolutely.
And you started as a teacher, and now you have worked your way up to director of studies of the English language department.
Pretty much. We have to be careful with the terminology. I'll just say coordinator for the English studies department.
Okay, coordinator for the English studies department. So how many years did you teach until you got that title?
Well, I got that title in, I'd say 2017, but I'd started slowly gaining responsibility in the office, starting all the way back in 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, in 2001, we had another English teacher by the name of Emily, who was responsible for organizing and arranging all of the English language testing that we did. And she wasn't able to carry on in that role anymore. I think she ended up going to Berlin. So that role was vacated, and I was asked, hey, is this something you would be interested in? And I said, sure, yeah, absolutely. And that's when I started working in the office. I basically started just by organizing and arranging like the English language tests that we had at the time. So yeah, that's where it started. And then just kind of slowly, piece by piece, started adding more duties to that portfolio until it ended up being something that I was able to do full time. Yeah.
How important did your language skills attribute to your upward mobility?
Oh man, I don't want to disappoint anybody by saying this, but I don't think it played much of a role at all. See, because in Lingua, as you know, we want to do everything in the target language. So there's no translations in the class, and that's something that I was and am a believer in. So I tried to keep German out of the classroom. I say almost 100%. But
like all the administrators, like if you're in charge of like arranging the tests, I'm assuming the TELC tests or the in-house test that you give to students for assessment or something like that.
Yeah, we did. Most of this would have been the external tests. So TELC was one of the tests. At the time, we were doing Cambridge tests as well. Cambridge tests, TELC tests, and then BULATs. I don't know if you're ever familiar with that, but it was also kind of a Cambridge run thing, but it was a computer-based test. But I was just going to say, even with most of those contacts, I suppose with TELC's based in Frankfurt. So whenever I was communicating with them, either by telephone or by email, I would do that communication in German. But when we had Cambridge tests, for example, or anything to do with Cambridge, obviously they're speaking English. So yeah, I didn't have much need for the most part to speak in German, and that's something. Frankly, I don't know, maybe sadly that's carried on to this day, but most of my business is done day to day in English. So even back then that was the case. So that's why I'm saying the German thing, obviously, yeah, I'm happy that I can speak German, but as far as the role that it's played in my career, actually pretty minimal, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you still teach lessons today or no?
No, full-time admin only. I might say, for example, if there's an absolute emergency, somebody called in sick 10 minutes before the class is supposed to start, I might go in there and just kind of do emergency duty until we're able to get another teacher in there. But for the most part, my teaching days are behind me. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of your major responsibilities?
Major responsibilities. Well, like I said, for the coordinator for the English department is, I didn't want to put myself in a position higher than I am, but it is kind of like the director of studies for the English department. So it's really nice, that we have the inlingua proprietary material, but say, for example, if there's something external that needs to go on, basically I'm responsible for gathering the pedagogical material for the teachers, whatever they're doing, and then helping support them with whatever they need. I still do all the English language testing. That's been pared back a little bit because I don't know. We stopped using Cambridge and we stopped using TELC for English. TELC is still big business in German, but for English, we don't use that too much. So we switched to doing the TOEIC test.
Okay.
That's what we do now for English language assessment for the most part. Lingua skill.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the TOEIC test, are you using the 2 skills or the 4 skills test?
2 skills primarily.
Okay.
2 skills primarily, but we do the 4 skills test if somebody requests it. Yeah.
And I guess for our listeners, the 2 skills that would be reading and listening. Yeah.
Reading, listening. Okay. They do have a speaking and writing module. Gets booked on its own pretty infrequently, but the 4 skills test, like I said, if somebody requests it, we can absolutely do that. We just made the switch to the TOEIC test because it was more flexible and for us, frankly, a little bit easier administratively. So that's why we decided to go that route.
So let's talk about materials.
Sure. We like the books. The inlingua books are fantastic, and especially, like I said, if they're combined with somebody who's using the method effectively, they're really, really good. But every now and then, somebody might need a little bit more consolidation work with the grammar or something like that.
Right.
So for things like that, what we kind of tend to turn to is if sometimes just a straight grammar book, something like I think it's the Oxford books, Raymond Murphy.
Yeah, like an Oxford or a grammar book or a Pearson's or one of the other big publishers for English language books.
Something like that. But the other thing that we tend to like to use are activities books, because again, we want to stick with the inlingua method. We want to keep things communicative. So if we can find role plays that have particular grammatic theme, then that's something that we're going to turn to. That's something that we're going to want to do. And then it kind of depends also on what type of class we're talking about. So the Arbeitsamt classes, the classes for the unemployed, those are basically business classes. So if we can get additional, some sort of supplementary material for business, things that's going to help things that are going to help somebody solidify their telephoning skills or their business correspondence.
Right.
Those are some of the things that we turn to as well. So that's I think that's where we go for supplementary.
Yeah, I think the modules, and I think I could be honest on this podcast. I like the modules that inlingua has.
The modules are great. I like the modules as well. But how can I say this? They're very I find them to be very vocabulary focused. This is how you say this, but they're not. I like to bring in something else, or I'll tell my teachers to bring in something else to kind of give them something a little bit more like real world feel. Okay, this how to say this now. Let's put this into practice. Yeah. So when you talk about that, I'm sure like the 3 Ps and stuff. When we talk about that production,
sure.
That's where we want to spend a lot of time, because actually the other thing that we have to contend with, or the other thing that we have to figure on, is the fact that a lot of Germans have pretty solid English skills.
There, not here.
Oh, really? Yeah, I guess. Of course. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I suppose that is regional, but here in Munich, a lot of Germans, they'll tell you, "Oh, my English is so poor," and then they'll rattle off some really complicated sentence. So we're not, for the most part, particularly in the business classes, dealing with people who are starting from scratch. So it's not a matter of teaching them vocabulary per se, but how to implement that, how to actually put that into practice in their day-to-day lives. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think I've been working here almost 5 years. I think we've only given 2 C1 TELC tests.
Oh, really?
I think most of our students are like, A1, A2. We have some strong B2s. I would say most are like, between, B1, B2.
I don't know. I don't think I necessarily have the statistics for where they fall on that CEFR spectrum, but
B1, B2. They can give you reasons why.
Sure, absolutely.
Which is the most important thing. Yeah. All right. So you are coordinating the languages. Are you and you're helping with materials? What else are your responsibilities?
I wear a few different hats at inlingua Munich now. So in addition to that, my God, if you put my actual job title or job description on a business card, it'd be a paragraph, because it's, coordinator for English studies. I also do coordinator for our digital learning products. And the final thing that I do, last and certainly least, is our Datenschutz, like data protection. Yeah, so I'm the data protection officer at the school.
Have you had to enforce it yet? Like really enforce it, other than just telling people? Or
well, we wanted to be. That's something I give our school management a lot of credit for. Is when that stuff started coming down the pipeline, we got a jump on that, and it was something that they were very diligent about, and it's something that we wanted to get ahead of, rather than try and play catch up with.
Right.
So in the beginning, to help me, because data protection is also not. I didn't go to school for data protection. I'm not a lawyer, but they wanted an internal data protection officer. But to help me get my start, we also worked with an external data protection officer who did. This is their business. This is what they did. So they helped to kind of put all our procedures in place, to get our processes written down in a way that was appropriate to the new GDPR law and stuff. So that, like I said, that groundwork was laid, and basically I'm just doing a little bit of a maintaining action to make sure that we are keeping up with data protection, make sure that we're not violating anything, and just kind of helping out where I can if people have questions. I'm more responsible, basically, just like I said, from the pedagogical side. I'm looking for new content, trying to determine what content is appropriate for, if somebody says, okay, this is my goal. Okay, what content are we going to use? And like I said, obviously, if the inlingua material fits, fantastic. But if it doesn't, then we have to go look in other places, because if you have somebody who says, oh, what's an example from recently? Maybe something like international tourism or something like that. This company, they work in this industry, and they need content that is specific to that industry. And if inlingua doesn't produce that material, then it's a search to try and find the appropriate material that we can bring into the classroom to actually give them, the content that they want and need. So that's, like I said, more on that end, and then also supporting teachers. If the teachers say, "Hey, listen, I had a question about X, Y, and Z," I'm their primary liaison for the English teachers with the admin side of the house. So they'll talk to me. We'll try and figure that out.
How many English language teachers do you guys employ?
Do you mean festangestellt, or do you mean freelancer?
Total.
I don't know. That number has sadly gone down the pandemic, because it's had its effect on our school, just as it has, I'm sure, every other school and every other business, frankly. So that number's gone down a bit, and I'd have to rack my brains, because I don't have the exact figures off the top of my head. But I would guess somewhere on the order of 20-ish, give or take.
And how many hours per week on average are those 20 teachers? How many hours are they working?
Well, that's where we have to definitely differentiate between the contracted employees and the freelance employees.
Right.
Because especially, like I said, under pandemic conditions, we have to make sure that our contracted employees are getting the bulk of the hours. So right now, if I had to say, it's kind of, if you asked our full-time teachers, they're probably still not getting the hours that they would really like to have, but they're getting solid hours, and our freelancers are not getting a great deal right now. So if anybody wants to, here's this podcast.
Yeah, if anybody's listening and wants to apply for a job, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Send me an email by all means.
Nothing wrong with that. So you've lived here now a long time. What keeps you here?
Inertia. There's probably you're probably expecting a little bit more of a romantic answer. No. I love it here. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely do. Like, I really like living in Germany. It's just kind of like how can I say this without like falling into stereotype or anything like this? It's a very well organized society. Things are very clean. Things are done pretty efficiently, until you go into some of like the bureaucratic offices, then that the whole myth of German efficiency kind of takes one on the chin. But, but for the most part, for the most part, like I said, I like living here. It's there's a pretty good mix to me in the work-life balance. And the other thing, just from a purely selfish standpoint, is I love the fact that it's right in the middle of Europe. I was always, even from the time I was very young, interested in traveling around Europe. And there are probably few better places to do that from than Germany, and specifically Munich. It seems to be right at the heart of Europe. So I can go an hour and a half, to the west and be in France, or an hour and a half to the right and, be somewhere else. And it's just a really good place, a good jumping off point for travel.
Okay.
So I like all of those things. Yeah.
So what has been your favorite country to visit outside of Germany?
France, hands down.
Okay.
I love France. Actually, I've become a big Francophile since living in Germany, or in Europe, I should say. Because I mean, I know you're American. You probably have France doesn't have the most sparkling reputation probably in the United States, but you come, you meet French people, and for the most part, in my experience with them, has been fantastic.
Okay.
Kind of fun-loving people, beautiful language, beautiful country, and we were talking. It's kind of funny. It's going to come around to food again. You asked me how I like the German cuisine. I like it. Think it's fantastic. It's very basic, very meat and potatoes. And again, I'm not saying that as a criticism. I actually, that's one of the things that I find appealing about it. But on the other hand, when you think about something very fancy, that's French cuisine, and it's also wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll break one of the negative stereotypes I have about France, about rudeness.
Yeah, you know what? I will say this. I've heard a lot of people say that. Thankfully, I've never experienced that. I don't know what it is. I think it's because I speak just the teeny tiniest bit of French, but
that's why. That's exactly why.
Yeah, but enough just to kind of make myself understood. And I think as long as you put forth that effort and they see that, then thankfully that's never been something that I've had to deal with.
Do you think? I mean, do you think Germans are more appreciative because you speak German? Do you think they're more like welcoming? Are they more cordial? Or
I think for me, that's probably going to apply anywhere that you go on planet Earth. If you go and at least make an effort, at least try to engage the people in their own, in their own tongue, and just show, again, like I said, that you're interested in them and that you've made the effort. I think that's going to go a really long way. Having said that, there's that stereotype of the French people being rude to people that don't speak French. Again, like I said, I can't speak to that from my own experience. I've never had that experience. But I will say that if you take that stereotype and contrast it with the Germans, I think, are a lot more willing to just kind of jump to English right off the bat. But again, I'll just reiterate that anywhere you go, I think if you try to engage with them in their own language and you make that effort, I think it'll pay dividends too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
When I was teaching, people always ask me now, do you miss teaching, or are you happier in the administration? I say temperamentally, probably happier in the administration. I don't miss teaching a great deal, but what I do miss about teaching is the socializing.
Yeah.
I really liked going into classrooms, getting to meet new people. And you actually, I think you can testify to this, and it goes to something that you were just saying. You make friends, you have these people, they put their trust in you to teach them. You develop a rapport throughout the course of the lessons and whatever, and then you actually become friends with some of these people. So there are still some of my students, even though I haven't been in a classroom, well, at least let's say full time, I haven't been teaching since 2017. So even 4 years down the road now, there's still students that I keep in touch with, and I kind of miss being able to go out, meet new people, hear about their stories, and then just kind of become friends with them. And the flip side of that is also going to companies and kind of learning about the companies. It's some of our biggest clients in the past were insurance companies. We had companies like Generali, companies like Munich Re, and I didn't know very much about insurance except for, like what you needed to have on your car in the US or whatever. But you learn about that, and then you start to learn about the reinsurance industry, and you just kind of learn a little bit more about the world around you. And I think that was really cool thing that you're out in the classroom, you're teaching, but you're also learning things yourself. And that is probably the one thing that I miss the most about being in the classroom.
Is your long-term plan, are you going to stay in Germany?
Everything's, nothing's decided. I love living in Germany. I've got a life here. Fantastic girlfriend. Just life is good as far as I'm concerned. But nothing's off the table. Let me say that. The first thing, when I came back in 2010, I was also thinking at that point, I'm still, relatively young. I'm not tied down by family considerations. I don't have a wife of my own. I don't have any children, anything like that. I'm going to go to Germany and see what kind of life I can build there, and then probably come back after 5-ish years. Well, now we're 11 years on from that point, and I'm still here and don't have any immediate plans to go back. But I guess the reason, the long-winded way of saying what I wanted to say was, I kind of always envisioned going back to the US, and that's not off the table either. But again, like I said, there's no plans to do that, but it's just at some point, who knows? We'll see.
Well, dude, it's Friday. I know you're gonna get on to whatever you're gonna do.
I appreciate it, Scott. It was a pleasure talking to you. This was actually quite a bit of fun for me. I thought it was pretty cool. If you need anything else, you have my contact information. Just contact me.
Sounds great, brother. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care. It was good talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to inlingua Podcast, live from Dessau. We hope you stay tuned for more episodes.